They started with a cabin, a wood stove, and almost nothing else. 4 years later, they are building fish wheels for their neighbors. That is the story of Holdfast Alaska, a family who moved into one of the most remote corners of the United States and quietly turned a survival experiment into something much larger than themselves. By the time you reach the end of this video, you will understand exactly why the homestead you see on their channel today bears almost no resemblance to the one that launched in 2021, and why that transformation happened faster than anyone, including the family themselves, could have predicted. The Copper River Basin of interior Alaska is not a place most people choose deliberately. It is a place that filters people. Temperatures regularly drop to -40, -50 degrees Fahrenheit. Roads close, rivers freeze, supply runs become multi-day operations. The margin for error is nearly zero. Holdfast Alaska launched their YouTube channel in February 2021, and from the opening videos it was clear this was not a couple relocating for aesthetics. There was no glossy farmhouse aesthetic, no curated pantry shots. What viewers got instead was raw footage of people learning, fast, how to survive in a landscape that punishes hesitation. The early videos documented the basics: cutting firewood, hauling water, keeping warm. The cabin they moved into was functional but minimal: a wood stove, thick walls, enough space to live without comfort being the priority. What separated Holdfast Alaska from dozens of other homesteading channels from the very beginning was the specificity of their situation. This was not rural Vermont. This was not a hobby farm 2 hours from a city. The Copper River Basin sits in a region where the nearest major supply run requires driving hundreds of miles across mountain passes in vehicles that regularly break down in extreme cold. That reality shaped everything about the channel. Every video carried weight because every task carried consequence. Fail to preserve enough salmon and you face a hungry winter. Let the wood stove go out at 40 below and the pipes freeze within hours. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. The first full year was a crash course in everything they did not know. Subsistence living in remote Alaska operates on a completely different calendar from the rest of America. The salmon run on the Copper River dictates your summer. The first hard frost dictates your fall. The depth of winter snow dictates your travel. Miss one of those windows and you pay for it across the entire year. Holdfast Alaska learned this system the hard way. Early videos showed the family adapting in real time, foraging wild mushrooms, drying salmon the traditional way over fire, rendering tallow from moose fat to produce their own cooking oil. Skills that most Americans have not needed for generations became weekly necessities. The wood stove was central to everything: heat, cooking, drying food, preserving warmth for the animals they would eventually bring onto the property. When the wood stove failed at -40, an event they documented in March 2026, it was not just a mechanical problem. It was a survival event, the kind that reminded their audience what the stakes of this lifestyle actually are. One detail from those early years rarely surfaces in coverage of the channel. The family was not simply homesteading for themselves. From very early on, they engaged with the local community and indigenous knowledge systems of the Copper River region, learning traditional food preservation methods, salmon drying, birch syrup production, wild foraging, that have sustained people in this landscape for centuries. That thread, running quietly through the early content, becomes critical later in this story. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. By 2024, the homestead had stabilized enough that the family could think beyond immediate survival. And what they did next fundamentally changed the nature of what Holdfast Alaska is. They added goats, not as a project, as a commitment. In Alaska, livestock requires infrastructure at a level most farmers in the lower 48 never have to consider. You cannot leave animals in an unheated barn when the temperature outside is -40. In January 2026, the family documented baby goat kids being born at -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Keeping those animals alive required round-the-clock attention through one of the harshest winters in recent memory. They built a dedicated barn. They hauled feed across frozen terrain. They did midnight welfare checks when the temperature dropped to its lowest points. That same winter, they launched a second major cabin build. Not a renovation, a new structure, built from scratch in sub-zero temperatures, starting with hauling lumber on a 24-hour run through the mountains. The foundation, the floor beams, the framing, all documented week by week through the coldest months of the year. And then the horses arrived. Pack horses in the Alaskan backcountry are not a novelty. They are a practical solution to a specific problem: moving gear, supplies, and harvested game across terrain that no vehicle can reach. The family built out what they now call their pack string, multiple horses trained to carry loads through wilderness that would stop a snowmobile. By spring 2026, they were riding bareback, preparing for their first packing season and rebuilding a barn specifically designed to support that operation. In 12 months, the Holdfast Alaska homestead went from a single cabin with a wood stove to a working operation with goats, pack horses, a second cabin under construction, and a barn. The channel that started as a survival diary had become something else entirely. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. Off-grid living in remote Alaska means solving problems that do not have standard solutions. Power is one of them. Solar panels in interior Alaska deal with months of minimal sunlight and extreme temperature swings that degrade battery systems faster than manufacturers ever account for. Wind power requires turbines rated for conditions that most commercial products are not designed to handle. The standard answers do not work here. In early 2026, Holdfast Alaska unveiled something that stopped their audience cold. They had acquired a retired cell tower diesel generator and were converting it into the foundation of their off-grid power system, not a portable generator. A commercial-grade unit originally designed to keep a telecommunications tower running through Arctic conditions, repurposed to power a homestead in one of the coldest places in America. The installation required building a dedicated foundation, running fuel lines, and integrating the generator into the homestead's electrical infrastructure. It was engineering work done without contractors, in the middle of an Alaskan winter, by a family who had taught themselves most of what they know since arriving in the Copper River Basin. By January 2026, the system was online. The homestead had power, reliable, sustained power, for the first time. That single development changed what was possible on the property. Refrigeration, lighting, power tools that could run without being tethered to a portable unit. But here's the part that changes everything about what you just heard. None. The Copper River Sockeye Salmon Run is one of the most important subsistence events of the year for communities in interior Alaska. For Holdfast Alaska, the fish wheel, a mechanical wheel anchored in the river that catches salmon as the current turns it, became one of the most significant parts of their annual calendar. In summer 2025, they launched their first fish wheel on the Copper River. The results were immediate and dramatic. Videos documented catching over 100 salmon in under 48 hours. The family processed every fish, smoking, drying, canning, freezing, working through the harvest with the kind of focused urgency that only exists when your food supply for the coming winter depends on those few weeks of peak run. Then, in June 2026, the fish wheel was lost to the river. Fast water and debris. The wheel they had built and depended on was gone before the salmon peak arrived. What happened next was not a collapse, it was a rebuild, but with a difference. Within weeks, they had a new wheel in the water. The rebuild videos, racing to reconstruct before the salmon arrived, became some of their most watched content of 2026. And then came a video title that marked a turning point the audience had not seen coming. Building a fish wheel for our village, not for their family, for their village. That single shift, from building for survival to building for community, is the moment the Holdfast Alaska story moved into a different chapter entirely. And that's when the decision was made, the one nobody around them saw coming. The village reference in that July 2026 video is not incidental. The Copper River Basin is home to small, geographically isolated communities with deep roots in subsistence culture. Communities where traditional skills like fish wheel operation, salmon preservation, and wild foraging are not hobbies, but the practical fabric of daily life. By 2026, the Holdfast Alaska family had spent enough years in this landscape to become embedded in that culture in a way that goes beyond what their early videos suggested. The knowledge they have accumulated about fish wheel construction, traditional salmon drying, birch syrup harvesting, wild plant identification, and off-grid infrastructure in extreme cold has become something they are beginning to share outward, not just document for an audience. That community dimension gives the channel an entirely different weight. Most homesteading channels on YouTube operate as aspirational content for viewers who will never live this way. Holdfast Alaska has evolved into documentation of a functional, rooted life in a specific place, one where the skills matter beyond the camera, and where the relationships with neighbors and community members shape the decisions being made on the property. The pack horses reinforce this. In the Alaskan backcountry, a trained pack string is a genuine asset to an entire region. The ability to move supplies and harvested game through terrain unreachable by vehicles is a capability the whole community can benefit from, not just the family that trains and maintains the animals. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet. Growth on YouTube is rarely linear. Most channels plateau. They find their audience, settle into a rhythm, and grow slowly, if at all. Holdfast Alaska is not following that pattern. As of July 2026, the channel sits at 238,000 subscribers and 35.8 million total views across 184 videos. Those numbers alone tell part of the story. But the growth trajectory tells the rest. In the 30 days prior to this video being made, Holdfast Alaska gained 26,000 subscribers. To put that in context, they added, in a single month, more than 10% of the entire audience they had built across the previous 4 years. The channel is not just growing, it is accelerating. The content driving that growth is not their most sensational material. It is not survival emergencies or dramatic rescues. The videos pulling the biggest numbers are the ones that document the complexity of the operation they have built. The fish wheel rebuilds, the salmon harvests, the cabin construction, the pack horse work. Viewers are not just watching for the extreme conditions. They are watching because the project itself has become genuinely ambitious. There is something else worth noting in those numbers. The channel publishes consistently, no long gaps, no burnout hiatuses. In a landscape where creator fatigue is one of the most common reasons channels stall, Holdfast Alaska has maintained a cadence that reflects the reality of their lifestyle. There is always something happening on a working off-grid homestead in one of the most demanding climates on Earth. The content problem most creators struggle with does not exist here. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. There are hundreds of homesteading channels on YouTube. There are dozens claiming to document off-grid life in Alaska or the rural American West. Most of them share a common feature. The homestead is the backdrop, and the creator is the subject. Holdfast Alaska has quietly inverted that relationship. The land, the Copper River Basin, the river itself, the salmon, the mountains, the cold, is the subject. The family is the lens. That distinction sounds subtle, but it produces completely different content. The stakes are set by the landscape, not manufactured for the camera. The problems are real, not staged. The solutions are specific, technical, and informed by years of accumulated knowledge. That is why the fish wheel loss in June 2026 hit the audience the way it did. It was not edited for drama. The wheel was gone, and they had to rebuild. The audience understood what that meant, not because they were told it was serious, but because 4 years of content had taught them exactly what that equipment represents in this family's survival calendar. That earned understanding between creator and audience is not something you can buy with production value. It builds slowly, video by video, over years. And it is one of the main reasons Holdfast Alaska's growth is accelerating rather than leveling off. Subscribers who find the channel now have years of documented history to fall back on. The more they watch, the more they invest. The more they invest, the more they tell others. The homestead that started with a cabin and almost nothing else now has 2 structures: a functioning power grid, a working goat herd, a trained pack string, operational fish wheels, and a place in the broader community of the Copper River Basin. "4 years in the Copper River Basin, at -50, with a fish wheel on a dangerous river, and goats giving birth in the dark, will change everything about how you understand what you are capable of." That is what Holdfast Alaska documents, not survival, but the slow accumulation of competence until survival becomes something larger, something rooted, something that serves more than just the people in the frame. The channel's next chapter is already beginning. The fish wheels are running for the village. The pack string is ready for the backcountry season. The second cabin is taking shape, and the salmon are coming back to the Copper River, the way they always have, whether anyone is watching or not. The question worth asking, and the one that splits the Holdfast Alaska audience right down the middle, is this. Do you think a family who builds this much, in conditions this extreme, in a community this remote, has made the right choice building a life here for the long term? Or do you think, eventually, the land wins? Drop your answer below.